Well, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today for this very special interview. We're so thankful to be celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. I'm Michelle, and I'm the events coordinator for CARE, and our team have been really busy providing and creating some special publications, some online and in-person events to celebrate this significant milestone. And we, of course, could not have reached this 40-year milestone without your support. So we just wanted to take some time today to reflect on God's remarkable goodness and use of CARE over these 4 decades, and also to look ahead as well to what the future may hold. So this interview will be in 2 parts, and we hope that together it will be an encouragement to all watching. And we have lots to cover, so if we get straight to it. Firstly, I'd love to welcome Lyndon, our chairman and co-founder of CARE, and Nola Leach, our former chief executive. So thank you so much both for being with us today. And it's great to have you both with us. Lyndon, we're now 40 years on from when you decided to start CARE, which grew out of the nationwide Festival of Light. Can I ask what the catalyst behind the decision was to bring CARE into being?
I think it was a passion to, on the one hand, be campaigning, and on the other hand, demonstrating compassion. And I want to have those 2 halves making the whole: campaigning, declaring Christian truth, and demonstrating Christ's compassion.
And Lyndon, would you be able to help us understand a bit of the political landscape at the time when CARE came into being, the time, what it was like for Christians, and why you felt an organisation like CARE was needed?
Well, there were many good things arising out of the 1960s. More young people were involved in leadership. But one of the downsides of that period was it was a period of permissiveness. There was legislation right across the board on all matters of subjects, from witchcraft to abortion to sexuality to nudity, that suddenly, I think, altered the course of our nation's history. And Christians suddenly woke. And it was Lady Lothian one day in the central lobby of the House of Commons who said to me, "Lyndon, whilst Christians were asleep in the 1960s, lights went out in the Houses of Parliament that may never be relit again." And it was an awakening on the part of Christians who could see the extent, the damage of permissiveness in society.
Lyndon, what were those, obviously 40 years on, it's amazing to see where CARE is now. What were those early days like? What was it like kind of starting something new and exciting? How was that?
Yeah, it was quite primitive. Both Charlie Colchester and I were living by faith. There wasn't enough money. I think the annual income was something like £20,000. We were given a disused vicarage basement in Mayfair as our headquarters. And of course, many people were hostile to CARE in the early days. They saw us being against various things rather than for good things. That's quietly changed over the years, but it was quite a tough time for us all, because we thought, we might not succeed in bringing this positive image of CARE's role, but God's been gracious and that's been achieved.
That's brilliant, amazing. And Nola, just to bring you in, you are our chief executive and working for CARE for 26 years, many of those years as our CEO. And I think it'd be wrong to say that you've slowed down since you left CARE. I think that you've been...
I haven't noticed that, but yes.
Yeah, still doing phenomenal work, mentoring people across the world, really, which is amazing. I wonder if you could tell us, over your time as CEO at CARE, a few ways that God has surprised and challenged you in that time.
Yeah, I think there are 3 main ways, actually, that God has challenged me. And the first is that working in partnership with our supporters, we have been able to make a difference, both nationally in our national life, but also in individual people's lives, whether it was in the early days, before I was chief executive, through the Homes programme, where those in need could have respite and lives were turned around. We could think of the work of the pregnancy crisis centres and women facing the trauma of an unplanned pregnancy. or post-abortion issues, and being cared for and helped, and many of them kept their babies, but if they didn't, of course, caring for them. And then I think our supporters, writing to their MPs, getting engaged in something which did make a difference, and of course undergirding it all was their prayers. And so working in partnership, I think, is the thing that really struck me during that time. I think I mentioned prayer, and I think there are two other things that really struck me. One was the power of prayer and the need for prayer. And the second thing is linked to that, actually, that we are in a spiritual battle. And I think over the years, we've seen occasions where everything seems to be against us, but actually the power of prayer and working with our supporters, God has acted and we've been faithful. We haven't always been successful, but we've sought to serve him, and that's been a tremendous privilege.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, as you said about being faithful, I think that's just such an important aspect. And I think looking over the long term, being able to see the impacts, the gradual impacts that's happened. Lyndon, I wonder if you could let us know, as time has gone on, what has CARE's impact in the public square looked like? Do you think when you first started, has it looked how you imagined it would, as we're 40 years on now?
Can I say, first of all, working with Nola has been one of the most exciting endeavors I've ever engaged in. And apart from Celia, Nola is the most dynamic partnership I've had with anyone. And it's been a real privilege to work together, cooperate together, not always agree together, but understand each other and to find the best solutions.
Yeah,
yes, I think I remember when I was invited to become chairman, I actually broke down in tears because I thought I would go down with the anti-image, and I didn't believe that CARE would have such an impact. And that's where Nola's point about prayer is so real. It's not flesh and blood. It's spiritual forces of darkness, and God's holy and almighty sovereign power that's enabled us to actually break a mold and to be a positive influence for good in politics, with politicians, and for the future.
Yeah. In terms of specifics, Nola, I wonder if you could just help us. So obviously the prayer has been phenomenal, and we thank our supporters for praying, for giving financially, and we're just so thankful for the impact that's had and what God has done through CARE. I wondered if you could highlight a few key areas of the years where you've really seen God use CARE.
I think there are many of them, actually, and I think that's encouragement to us today when we think we perhaps can't influence what's happening in society. I mean, we could talk about the long-term work we've done in relation to marriage and getting it recognised in the tax system. We could talk about the protection of children online, and after a long period of time, getting that recognised. I think I'd highlight two areas particularly where we made a very significant difference. And one was in the area of human trafficking. Northern Ireland is in the news at the moment, and I think it is phenomenal that the work of our team, and under God, supporting a wonderful Christian peer, Lord Morrow, over probably 3 or 4 years, meant that legislation was unanimously passed in Stormont that was the basis of the Modern Slavery Act in the rest of the UK, actually, for the protection of victims, for the prosecution of those who used people in that awful way. And to be there, I think actually one of the wonderful things was hearing how our team actually behind the scenes kept Lord Morrow going. And that's something I think which is really characteristic of, I think, of CARE going back, the relationships we built, the support we were able to give to men and women of goodwill who were seeking to make a difference. So I'd highlight human trafficking particularly. I think I'd also highlight those areas where the prevention of a change in the law to allow for physician-assisted suicide. there have been repeated attempts over the years, and it's coming back again, and it's in the Scottish Parliament now, to the UK. And each time, with the help of our supporters, under God, and the expertise of our team, we've kept that at bay. And the law hasn't been. We were on a war footing, counting people in who were voting and getting people into the house who perhaps weren't going to come. And I think that was a real highlight as well.
Yeah, no, those are some phenomenal examples, and from such an amazing talented team as you said as well. And I think when you said about obviously in Scotland with the assisted suicides and it coming back and back again, I think the word faithful is often used when referring to the work of care. Lyndon, if I could just bring you in, why do you think faithfulness is such an important aspect to our work?
Yes, I think people look to care as a faithful ministry from our very beginning. The people that were most vulnerable, that we were championing and campaigning for, is still amongst the most important people that care is seeking to support. And I think our biblical view, wanting to declare Christian truth, we've not veered from the need to be God's representative and God's spokesperson and God's servant on earth. And we haven't become liberal in our theology or changed our theology. We've kept to the roots of care. At the same time, we've been willing to expand and develop, whether it's problem gambling or trafficking or online safety. So it's that sticking to our roots, but being flexible enough to change without changing the values and the basis on which we operate.
Thank you, Lyndon, for that. In terms of, so thinking now, looking slightly ahead, so Lyndon, along with Charlie, you began the leadership program back in 1993, and that's also celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, which is amazing. Lyndon, could you firstly just briefly explain to us what the leadership program is for those who might not know, and also what the catalyst was behind the idea of starting it?
Yes, I think Charlie and I had a lunch meeting with David Alton in the members' dining room in the House of Commons, and David turned and waved at the MPs. He said, unless you change the membership of this House, we're going to be defeated again and again. We came back to care and decided we would start a leadership program where we would equip young people who had a vision for public influence and policy to become ready to become leaders in any sector of society. And Charlie Hoare and Lee Wells were our first two guinea pigs. Two MPs agreed to have them 4 days a week, and we'd have them 1 day a week and just equip them from a biblical point of view and from inspiring leaders who'd made a difference in society to come and address them and inspire them. And as they say, the rest is history.
And of course, Nellie, you led the leadership program when you were CEO at CARE. What would you say are some of the biggest encouragements that you'd seen over the years?
Oh, I think, I'm sure Lyndon would agree with this. I think he's often said it, actually. We never would have expected at this point in time to see where the graduates of the leadership program are working now under God, to make that real Christian difference, not just to be nice in their jobs, but to do them and represent God. And to see where the alumni of the program are now is staggering. MPs at the highest level, people in the Scottish Parliament, people working for NGOs around the world. It's staggering, actually, and the quality of those young people, and now some of them a lot older, is just such an answer to prayer, and so encouraging, really making a difference in society.
Listening to the radio news or watching television, I'll turn to Stephen and say, she was on the CARE leadership program. He was on the CARE leadership program. As Nola said, in positions of significant leadership. And so it's just such a blessing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And if there were one thing, obviously that's an amazing answer to prayer in itself. So if there were one thing that you were praying for care in the coming 40 years, Nola, if I came to you first, what would that be?
I think it would be that care is protected. I think it would be as well that the doors still remain open for us to work and to make a difference.
And Lyndon, can I ask you the same question?
Yes, I think on a policy issue, it's always been our heart's desire that one day, as slavery today is unthinkable, that abortion would be unthinkable. And secondly, that the church will be seen to be demonstrating Christ's compassion and declaring Christian truth locally and nationally, that people would respect the great Judeo-Christian heritage rather than pillory, mock, and deny. They would respect because of the church and its role in society.
Well, thank you both so much for that. And can you imagine, we're over halfway in this interview this morning. That time's absolutely flown by. Where Lyndon, you're staying with us for part 2. Can I say a huge thank you to Nola? Thank you for taking the time out on this special occasion. And as we've said today, we're able to see the fruitfulness of the fruit of your faithfulness and vision and trust in God. And yeah, I just pray that you are able to continue to stand firm in what God calls you to do in this nation and internationally for you, Nola, as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
Can I say, Michelle, how much Charlie Colchester would have been with us this morning on this programme, but there's been a technical hitch, and we could never, ever, humanly speaking, have achieved what we've achieved without his vision, his tenacity, his personality, his gifting. I want to pay public tribute to him.
Yeah, thank you, Nola. Thank you, Lyndon, and thank you, Charlie, as well. That's great. Well, we're now going to be welcoming 2 more guests to join us. Firstly, Ross Hendry, CARE's Chief Executive. Hi, Ross.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Sophie Clark, who is the Senior Parliamentary Assistant and lay member of the General Synod, and also a CARE grad leadership alumni as well. So welcome, Sophie.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you for both joining us. Sophie, if I can just start with you. So last month you stood up at the Church of England General Synod and made an incredibly important maiden speech. Could you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. For those who aren't aware, the General Synod is almost like the Church of England's parliament. And the Church of England were basically trying to decide on blessing same-sex marriage. And we're proposing some prayers to do so. But in the process of doing that, we're actually also probably unintentionally condoning for the first time sex outside of marriage. And I thought, as someone who was engaged and who was due to be married, it was really important for me to say how that would impact hundreds of people like me from my church who are trying to really faithfully follow Jesus in a celibate way until they are married with one lifelong union between a man and a woman. And I just felt that that was a really important thing that I could say and speak into that debate. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you speaking it in that way. And we do have the video available. So I think Dan, our technical man, is going to be posting that link. So if you do want to watch that afterwards, you have the link there available to watch Sophie's speech. Sophie, I wonder if you could just let us know what you think some of the challenges are that are facing young Christians when it comes to standing or staying faithful to Jesus.
I think, to be honest, the main one is just being courageous enough to say something, and having that courage to stand up and be counted. Lots of topics that Lyndon and Nola have talked about are not easy topics to speak into society, because we have got to a point where we are so diametrically opposed with those who we rub shoulders with against in our workplace. And it can be really difficult to say things. And I knew that even just speaking in General Synod and saying where I was coming from, it felt almost like an admonition as opposed to a declaration, because I think living for Jesus in today's world is just so countercultural, that makes it, quite hard, sometimes embarrassing. And just sometimes I think there's just a bit of fearfulness around it. And I think one of the key things is to have those around you and really faithful Christian people who we look up to, Christian role models around you, encouraging you to speak out, and praying for you and knowing that you're supported. I think it's so easy, particularly within my workplace of Parliament, to almost be ambivalent to the sin around you, and you almost accept it as normal. And you can become a bit desensitized to just what's going on. And I think feeding on the word every day and praying throughout the day and having that conversation with the Lord, it keeps flexing your muscles, your spiritual muscles, to be able to discern more tricky and more grey areas and what you think about them from a biblical sense. And I think just that whole idea of remaining steadfast and consistent throughout your career. And I've had the most wonderful privilege of working for 2 Christian MPs who are absolutely consistent in their beliefs. And they, from the day of conversion, still have the same belief to their current position now. And that is just such an encouragement and something that I absolutely pray for and want to emulate and have my Christian colleagues emulate as well, is that consistency and steadfastness in the Lord. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We mentioned right at the beginning that you are a leadership program graduate or alumni. So could you just say how you feel the leadership program can help to equip young Christians for life in the public square?
I remember the first day of my care leadership year, and the wonderful Nola actually came in and gave us the most rousing speech. And she said, "This program will change your life." And it wasn't that I didn't believe her. I sort of thought, that's very nice, that's lovely. I can absolutely hand on heart say that it was a year that totally changed my life, and so much so for the better. It is just a year of refinement and iron sharpening iron, and it is so helpful to be able to be given frameworks in today's world, because it's so easy to say what's right and wrong for really simple moral issues, but when you get into more complicated issues in the public sphere that aren't necessarily clear cut, it has been vital that I have had a framework to be able to fall back on, a biblical framework to be able to figure out what I think about it, what I believe it is potentially beneficial or not beneficial to society, and how that would work out. And I think it is just the most amazing opportunity to meet the most wonderful Christians in different spheres of life. And it's so inspiring. It is so incredibly inspiring to meet people. I think lots of people in my generation almost take a bit of a defeatist attitude that as a Christian, it's quite difficult to progress in your workspace by being faithful to Jesus. And throughout the whole year of my care leadership program, that was shown time and time again, that faithfulness to the Lord, he will put you in the positions that he wants you to be. And as Nola and Lyndon have said, that can be in the highest, upper echelons of politics, that can be in the highest levels of academia. And it's so encouraging and inspiring to realize that, with the Lord and with faithfulness and steadfastness in your faith, he can just place you in the most incredible positions. And it was such a privilege to be in my care year and have 12 other wonderful people wrestling against these ideas and, coming across different concepts that I'd never thought about before, which gave me a more nuanced view on a topic, which has been so helpful in my career today and just in my general Christian faith. I would absolutely recommend it to anyone. It is amazing.
That's great. Thank you, Sophie. And speaking of God placing people in new roles. Ross, you joined us as our CARE CEO, and we're just so thankful to have you and your leadership. In terms of equipping young leaders through programs such as the Leadership Programme, what do you hope the impact will be in the next 10, 20, 30 years and beyond?
Well, Michelle, let me start at maybe an unexpected place, because I'm sure that people would think that I would start with saying we want our leadership program people to be the prime ministers and the cabinet members and the social leaders of our day. The primary purpose, our primary aspiration for every person joining the leadership team is that they finish the year with a deeper understanding of our amazing God and a profoundly deeper love of Jesus, and a desire to see how the Holy Spirit can work through their life into the calling that they have been called to. And so our heart and our desire is to see people faithfully walking with the Lord, serving him in 10, 20, 30, 50 years plus time. And many of those people, because of the giftings and talents that they've been given by God, will be drawn into opportunities to serve in public life. And as they are called into that area, we want them to be equipped to be deeply thoughtful people. Sophie mentioned nuance. The world wants to paint pictures of black and white, binary, simplistic answers to complex problems. We believe the Bible speaks truth into the great challenges of today, but the answers are often complex, dealing with truth and compassion in equal measure. So our aspiration is that there will be amazing points of gospel light dotted across the public square in 10, 20, 30 years' time, and that those dots of light will be salting public life and the leadership of the nation for the good. We don't want in 10, 20, 30 years' time tens or hundreds of care acolytes or advocates in the public square. We want tens and hundreds of Christ-like leaders in the public square.
Yeah, fantastic. Lyndon, I wonder, what is it about CARE's mission that still excites you? Just thinking about what Ross was saying then, and looking at what we want the future and the future of our young leaders to look like, and what we hope that their lives will be following Jesus faithfully. Looking back, obviously, at the Nationwide Festival of Light and thinking about those Christians who are faithful on that day as well, what is it about CARE's mission that still excites you, and the work that still excites you looking to the future?
One of my primary excitements, Michelle, is having Ross as our new CEO. He's a godly man, a man of experience and integrity, and he's taking CARE forward. He's willing to see what changes need to be made to be more and more applicable as light and salt in society, but at the same time anchored to the roots that brought CARE into being. One of our early straplines was declaring Christian truth, demonstrating Christ's compassion. We speak of grace and truth in the Christian life. We speak of compassion and civility, and that's where his heart lies. So I want to say to those watching today, this ministry is in faithful, safe hands. Keep praying for us.
Fantastic, absolutely. And Ross, back to you then. What are your hopes and dreams for what God can and might do through the work of CARE?
Well, first of all, Michelle, at anniversaries like this, I love the passage of the story of Samuel commemorating God's help of Israel by raising the stone Ebenezer, and that great hymn, isn't it? Here I raise my Ebenezer, here by thy great help I've come, and I hope by thy great pleasure safely to arrive home. Amazing hymn, and we can never lose the sight of where home lies in the future. But God cares about the journey as well, and the sort of the way in which we can impact society for the better. God has an amazing, great story. His desire is not to restrict us. Lyndon mentioned CARE was not founded to tell people what they can't do. It was founded to tell people that God has a vision for every person made in his image to flourish. And so our desire is to look at those areas of our society, our communities, and think about where the people in those communities are not flourishing?
Mm.
What are the barriers to holding them back to God's good plan for their good life? How can care use the public square, and particularly politics, and particularly public policy and lawmaking, to change things for good? God has a great, good plan for every person. We want to communicate that with civility, with grace, with humility, but with conviction, confidence, and courage.
Great, thank you so much. At this 40-year milestone, what would be your message to those watching and those who are supporting us, praying for us? What would be your message to our care partners?
I think it's take heart, be hopeful. There is plenty in the world that is depressing and that can cause us to lose heart. But we hope and believe in a great God. So please be hopeful that through partnering the church, that God can achieve great things. The first thing we say to people is, we cover your prayer because we believe that we have a God who listens, hears, and acts upon our prayers. So we absolutely adore and love the partnership that we have with every supporter, every church, every individual, because they are the points of light in their community. And so my message is, don't be down when you hear all the bad news in the press. Don't feel overwhelmed by the darkness. One of the images I share with people, that a single candlelight in complete darkness can be seen from 3 miles away. That single vulnerable flickering little candlelight can shine out in complete darkness and be seen from 3 miles away. Care sometimes may look as if it's that vulnerable flickering light, but light ultimately will win. And that is our hope. That is our joy. That is our confidence. That gives us resolve, resilience, and the determination to go on and speak God's better story into society.
And not all the darkness in the world, not all the darkness can put that candle flame out, because God's behind it.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for joining. Can you imagine it's been over half an hour already? So I want to thank you, Ross, for your leadership of care and for your vision for the future. Lyndon, thank you for the way that you continue to so brilliantly invest in people of all ages and really shepherd and engage emerging and younger leaders. And Sophie, thank you to you as well for the work that you do and for just speaking out with that boldness and with truth and grace as well. So thanks so much to you as well for helping to share this and tell this better story. And lastly, thank you to our partners. You, Michelle, we couldn't do this
being our events coordinator, bringing all of us together and communicating closely with our care supporters. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Lyndon. And yeah, just thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you don't already receive the care mailings, you can do so with the links that Dan will be sharing shortly in the comments box. Alternatively, you can go to our website, which is care.org.uk, and you'll also find resources there to help inform you, equip you, and encourage you. And if you've enjoyed this interview today and would like to be kept up to date with any other video content, please just click the subscribe button underneath the screen. And finally, a date for your diaries is the 7th of October, which is a Saturday. And that's when our 40th anniversary celebrations will continue in person at Westminster Chapel in London. And so more information will be sent out over the coming months for that as well. So please do sign up to our mailing list and you will receive an invite for that. And thank you once again for standing with us, and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.